Okay. Having
Hello.
a terrible time getting my lighting just right today.
Getting what? I didn't hear.
I'm having a hard time getting my lighting just today.
Yeah.
I'm running I'm running on multiple LEDs to get the green screen evenly lit up and back, but it's giving me a bit of a shadow off of my eyeglass frame.
Yeah. I wonder where. Sorry, I just have replied to that message from about the App Store. Yeah. So yeah, we have to decide on where to go. There's a lot of discussions that go really quite wide. I'm not sure if that's useful at this point, maybe, but we will see.
I'd like to see if we get ourselves working on a common code base, so that when we do go off and do little programmatic things, they can all integrate with one another, and we don't wind up with a bunch of individual demos that can't talk to each other or be combined.
Yeah. It is. Yeah,
I think that's sort of an Adam and Fabian kind of conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with that if they want to do that too. So that would be good. That would be good.
Let's see. Did you see that new Meta project where they want to have people running around with glasses recording everything that they're looking at so they can get data to work with for AR projects? Let me see if I can find a link to that. Hang on. Just go off to the other screen. Let's see, where would that be? All right, let me search for Meta. That should bring the story up. You can never find something again when you're looking for it. That's why I usually bookmark everything. I didn't bookmark that one because I was on my older Mac, which isn't the one that I use for our meetings. Oh, bother, it's not turning up. Well, when I find it, I'll email you the link.
Okay.
But basically, the story was they had a custom set of hardware glasses that you'd wear that have a camera in them and all the sensor array, but no ability to project anything into your field of view. And a big white light on the outside to let ordinary people know that the system is in use. Then the people who are participating in the project are going to have to wear distinct T-shirts that are branded so that people on the street can recognize them as being roving recording devices. And there's a button on the headset that you can press that will like nuke the last so many seconds worth of video from the database in case somebody comes up and says, "Oh my God, you're taking a picture of me. I don't want you to record me." Then they're going to use all of that data to get an idea of, I guess, how the world looks to the average person who might be wearing some future headset device, and use that as training data, I guess, for neural engines or whatever to figure out how to overlay VR on top of, or AR on top of the image coming in.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to need training sets, so that's kind of interesting.
Yes, that was the problem. Then they had a thing where there was a page for researchers to apply if they wanted to participate and walk around recording data for them.
Yeah, it's important as long as it's done in an ethical manner, of course.
That AR. Let's try that. I'm still running some searches trying to find that story. Why is it so elusive? research. Again. Ah, here it is. Okay, took Meta AR glasses research data gathering as a Google query to turn it up. I will paste the link into chat now. There we go. Project Aria is what they're calling it. So they want to get the people wandering around, figuring out where they're going in the city and what kind of input data the system would have to be working with. Research kit with glasses, a web portal, companion app, desktop app. Apply there for a research kit, partnered with Carnegie Mellon, National University of Singapore, and BMW. So I thought you should have that on your radar.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of real world data gathering pieces. That's for sure. Yeah, but if we're going to do a common code base, then of course we have to agree on what framework. I think it's A-Frame they use.
Yeah, that looks like it's the easiest to work with.
Yeah. But you're not going to be using a headset till next year. Is that still the case?
Not for the foreseeable future. When I see something that I think isn't going to just wind up sitting on the shelf, I'll look into it. But for the time being, I'm just working in 2D. But the nice thing is I can still be coding for 3D, even though I'm not using the 3D headset.
Yeah, kind of.
Well, we'll get to work, Fro. Don't worry.
Okay.
I have a good imagination. I can picture in my head what a full-size desk would look like floating in front of me, a meter out and all. It'll work.
Yeah, it'll work, but it really is such a different thing. I mean, I'm happy to lend you my Quest 2 for you to use my login credentials because my Pro is arriving this week, as you know. So
the trouble is, I'm a lawyer, so I can't do anything that violates anybody's terms of agreement, even if it's a sub paragraph. And I'm sure they don't have a lend your stuff out to other people to use at a remote location. And really, I just not for me.
Okay.
But when the time comes and there's something I'm actually going to be comfortable with, and I know I'm going to be using seriously, then I don't mind going out and making the investment to get it. But I just don't see the technology as being ripe enough for that yet, and it just kills me to have it just sitting on the shelf.
Well, I mean, yeah. Okay.
And I'm a little bit like Dina Larson too. Remember when she was talking at a symposium about the bad effect she had from the immersive experiences? And I know I'm just as susceptible to that sort of thing.
No, but you're not, Peter. That's absolutely not true. If you're sitting still in a room that is virtual, how are you going to get motion sickness when there's no motion? I mean, all the suggestions that I have shared with the group for how we should have the book in VR is sitting in a chair and it's in front of you. There is no walking or moving or anything like that. There's no traversal at all. So I don't know.
Hi, Brendo. Welcome.
Hello. So yeah, I don't know. I guess Fabienne is traveling, and I don't know what's going on with Mark. And I guess Bob is busy today. So, but you just interrupted our traditional Peter and me discussion over whether it is useful to have a headset to do coding for VR discussion, which goes on with regularity.
Yes, fair. Well, I would say nobody's made coding possible in VR yet. People have tried, and I do like what folks like Vi Hart attempted many years ago before she joined the ranks at Microsoft with was it Infinity Land? I can't remember the name of the particular sort of system, but people trying to create codable structures similar to Scratch, but out of blocks in VR. Fabian has some examples as well, but I really think that the expressiveness of it leaves too much to be desired. Yeah, I
No, we're
hope
talking about
that-
coding in VR. We're talking about coding for VR.
Oh, well, in order to understand VR, you've got to go in VR. I mean, I don't see how that could possibly be contentious. There are aspects of understanding the shape of your hand, the pose, the nuances of how your perception is impacted by being able to change the perspective of your head that simply can't be understood without it.
Did you see the link that I shared this afternoon, Brandel?
That little video clip with the swipe up.
No, it's one after that. Hang on, I'll put the link. 'Cause you asked about a user story. So I wrote a super, well, yeah, it has the Palm, it has a new tiny video in there.
Yeah, that was the video. Yeah, I saw that.
So the thing is, you don't have to read it. I can just explain it. There are many amazing interactions that can and views that can be possible. However, I've really spent a lot of time on this whole issue of when you have a book that has many different articles, what do you want to do? And we all agree you want to find out what to read next. And then the question is how to get there. It was good to have explored different ways of seeing the whole book at once in different forms. But I think when you're reading a book, what you really want to do is go through it. So all this is, one hand to do next page, but then you do hand up to go to the next section. Because when I play with our book, there's a lot of pages of just heavy text, like from the Q&A and things like that. So this is a way to skip that. Just lift me to the next section, This is page by page. A few simple things like that, maybe to begin with. And then when you get to specific medium, mural images or whatever, if we can work on the encoding for what that should be, because the combination of having a really simple book in VR, you just put it where you want, really easy interaction to scale it. I had a conversation by email with Mark today, who was annoyed at the experiences I had made because, as it turns out, he doesn't have space on his desk for VR stuff. And I had done everything with the basis that you would be sitting down and resting maybe your arms and leaning forward. So that's a really crucial bit of user research we found, that we have different initial positions. So being able to take the book and move it where you want it, whether it's a Fabian leaning back or whatever it is really key, even though it seems simple.
Yeah.
And then of course, just to close. So after these really basic things of how you move around, to have, you come across a mural, if you can literally pinch it, pull it out, and then you can see it kind of plops into huge size and the book becomes really small in the corner or whatever. Already the mural that we have, that kind of stuff, I think will just really, really make this vibrant.
Yeah, I think that would help a lot. There's a really neat article a friend linked recently. I'll have to dig it up. It's called "What People Get Wrong About VR," something like that. What people missing the point of VR, something like that. And it talks about it's written from the perspective of a man. Well, it's written by a developer who has sustained back injuries, which means that he does all of his computing actually reclining in a recliner these days. And so actually being able to have things pitched back, and when you said leaning forward, it made me realize, that not only does he lean back rather than forward, but he also prefers things to be pitched up. And so neutral poses that require things to be dead vertical are undesirable for him. And it would be nice for us to be able to construct environments and systems that are more amenable to or compatible with that kind of use, mode of use.
Have you ordered your Pro, Brandel?
No.
Order it. I'll tell you why I think it's going to be a smash hit. I have developed reasons. It's only coming here in 2 days, but the ease of putting it on and taking it off. I think
I don't intend to order a personal device.
No, but get a company one. You need to know the competition. Anyway, I'll talk about it on Friday, but the reason I'm mentioning it now, not that this is like a hardware forum or anything, but the actual visual quality of the Quest 2, I think, is fine. It's not fantastic. Clearly, the Apple one will be better based on all the leaked stuff, if it's true. Okay, fine. But the whole, when I sit this, it's clamped to my face. It's all over. It's like I'm really going into a dungeon and really going into a special thing, which is great for kind of a gamey type thing. But if I'm working, I want to have the work thing that is somewhere else, and I want to take this on and off easily, which it seems to do. And also, the other thing, so here's my Quest, as you all know it looks like, kind of in its box. The Pro, first of all, it's black. Secondly, it has kind of a stand that it just slaps onto. I think that's going to help too, a lot.
Oh,
On a
enormously.
professional
Yes.
desk, these things, take it on, put it there, charge it, put it back. I think they've got so many of the details right. There's little magnets for the two controllers when it goes into the charger. They've really focused on the actual user, I think. So I think just like Apple's had a million times, the reviews now are, it's awful, it's too expensive, it's stupid. And in a few weeks, I think we'll see, oh, I thought so, but I worked on it. And we can make it amazing, can't we, guys?
Yeah. On the subject of hardware as well, I don't know if you've ever heard about Project Soli. It's a system put together at Google, but it's a very small near field, I believe, radar imaging system, which means that you can move fingertips at sort of this scale against one another in proximity to it, and use that as a scroll. So that means you can use your own index finger as a trackpad, essentially, and that's very interesting.
Is that it?
Because it means, yes, yeah, and yeah, it's wonderful because it means that you have, anywhere you have the use of your hands, not only do you have the ability to have input, but you have the ability to have input in a context where you have contact feedback, which is what we typically have most of the time whenever we're making use of a tool. When we use a tool, when we execute a pencil grip or a precision grip with a device, we have the benefit of that object. Whereas in virtual reality, having such a grip impedes a sensor's ability to understand the nuances and idiosyncrasies of that specific grip. So, if you look at with absolute best in class, no exceptions, like if you try to look at a hand doing this, then it's incredibly hard for any external system to understand the subtleties of the change in pressure and movement. Whereas if if you have any sort of capacity as an artist, or even with a pen, then you know the amount of detail that you can jam into those muscles, into those fingers. And so I really think that there's a bright future in peripherals, in tools, as well as in just really digging into the details of what it is that a hand does. Project Soli, I believe, is one of the first best sort of presentations of opportunities to do better than just optical tracking in that regard, and I hope to see more in the future.
Yeah, I mean, that's why this gesture on the Quest is so stupid. They want to get up the menu. These two fingers, it never gets it. It just always kind of vibrates around that, even though generally the tracking. So,
right,
difference in quality. But so Peter was saying it would be good if we have a shared code base for whatever we're trying to do. I don't know what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't object. I don't actually use any. So I work on the web. I build things in HTML and JavaScript. I don't use any compilation passes or obfuscators or minifiers or builds even. So I work in a text editor, often directly on the internet, so that everything that I have is in its most manipulable form. I don't particularly like code management systems, so I issue GitHub or Git or even SVN or CVS back in the day, because they don't help me for when I'm doing work on my own terms. I use them obviously as a professional programmer in the context where I'm working with other people, but yeah, unless it's mandatory for the benefit of either a build system, which is necessary, which obviously it was for building Apple.com, or anything that I built at Resin. But I don't use them myself. But that said, everything that you can see, people have full access to.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So where do you think we should go from here, Brandel?
So, one of the things that I've been doing is continuing to think about the book in terms of the text. So I haven't seen anything that was written more than less than sort of 8 hours ago, because I just went to bed. But I'll read through that. What I'm going to do next, though, is I actually have in my to-do to spend a little bit more time with the corpus of the book, thinking about what those pieces of text are. So sort of going through and characterizing the chapters as we have them. Which ones are presentations, which ones are documents, which parts are discussions, and then trying to think about what might be the most ideal form of those things, in order to be able to kind of create environments for them, allocate space, and think about the interactions that might be appropriate. I really think that, for example, transcripts are wonderful. I think that they're best experienced as a process, as a sequence, with a temporality that is reflected in the original thing. It's always weird, reading subtitles or closed captions where the suspense is ruined because they've put the conclusion in the same box as the climax, and that's an interesting feature of it. So I think sort of retaining the temporality of those sequences is valuable. I think if we have YouTube videos, and we do have 29 YouTube video links in the draft that you shared recently, then it's worth thinking about how to elevate those as artifacts where they are relevant and important, and then where people kind of draw reference to objects and people, being able to elevate the significance of those in a way that renders them tangible would be valuable as well. So that's what I'm sort of thinking about and pursuing at this point.
Yeah, that's cool. We do need many different perspectives. I think it would be good to also go in a direction where it's quite generalizable. So if it is properly marked up, any document can be easily viewed in such a format. Yeah, I mean, obviously we're looking at the reading bit here, but at some point it'll be interesting to get into writing as well. I'm doing more writing in Author and VR.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing how it's going to be with the Quest Pro, and using my keyboard and using my computer, just using the headset purely as a screen, as an odd-shaped screen. But the problem with that is it's difficult to make another kind of window view appear unless I get to recode Author, of course.
Yeah, that is a challenge. It's great that it's able to be compatible with Mac in a way that allows you to create screens like that. I would be curious, given that it seems that Meta has much more aligned itself with trying to build Windows tools. If you have time with somebody with a Windows device to see what kinds of things can be possible with it through the Oculus app and other things like that as well, in terms of its multi-window approach and other things. I understand that they put some work into Blender a while ago to actually get not just the VR view, but also to be able to have panels and multiple windows represented within VR, such that you would have the ability to manipulate those things, which is very exciting. But yeah, I understand if you're on an Apple platform, then those things can be out of reach, and it's not. I wouldn't suggest forking out for for PC just for that. But yeah, it would be interesting to see if and how those things are rendered more usable with it.
Yeah.
really need to start-
Yeah, sorry, Peter.
Yeah, I really need to start consolidating a lot of my code projects. I sort of have a scatter gather mode of operating where I'll do a standalone test of one little subcomponent, and then I'll go off and I'll do another test of another subcomponent. So I have one that was integrating A-frame with IMBA, and that was like a couple IMBA versions back. Then I have another one where I was working on a grammar test bed, so that you'd have one text entry field for the grammar, another text entry field for the sample input to the parser that's generated. It would generate the parser and display the results. Then I started extending that with a facility to have multiple test cases all be evaluated in parallel every time the grammar changed. And all those different projects are in separate folders and standalone, and I want to start pulling them all together. So to move in that direction, I decided that it's time to go back into literate programming mode. So I compiled the newest version of NuWeb, which is now at 1.62, and I'm using Tinderbox as a meta editor to generate the NuWeb files, which then get split back out into all of the component source files for the project. So that's sort of the direction I've been working on. When it's done, the result will be a literate programming web describing my sample test bed environment that will be fully documented, cross-referenced, and a beautiful literate program that someone can follow to bring themselves up to speed on what's happening. So I think that could be a good basis for the group to start coalescing on one common code test bed.
Yeah. For me, everything centers on goals, specific, concrete goals and intentions. And so, in general, while I do a lot of silly stuff, most of the time, past a certain threshold, I need to have a particular and specific goal in mind that something will be in support of. And so, my sort of experiments, as you sort of have as well, Peter, are they tend to be pretty small, pretty constrained, where I have sort of tolerance and patience for them up until the point where, you know, it either succeeds or fails at delivering a specific capability.
Exactly.
But then I don't tend to integrate them unless there is a specific value to doing so immediately. And so there are times when that has happened. So VR Wikipedia is the amalgamation of simply being able to make a document in VR and the timeline sort of experimentation and exploration. But the benefit of that sort of that don't integrate until absolutely necessary sort of approach means that it was actually only at that point where I wanted to do that I did so, and it was as trivial as basically copy pasting each of the two constituent parts and then sort of taping them together essentially. That was able to give me that. I mean, the downside of it, to your point, is that other people don't particularly have the ability to navigate that sort of corpus of work and understand what's going on in it. But I don't trust anybody else to do that work for me anyway. So I prefer to be necessary within an organization, insofar as I understand what I did, and it takes a lot to get other people to understand that. But yeah, no, that seems like a valuable thing to be able to navigate. One of the benefits of it is having a ready resource like that means that you have all of those things ready to hand for conversations about what sort of opportunities exist, and be able to kind of flip as quickly as desirable between two previously unrelated kind of demonstrations of capability for the benefit of being able to kind of juxtapose those in people's minds to so that they can see what you see when you say you could just put this with that and then it would make this.
Yeah, and also it helps me to keep track of what past me did when future me needs to look at it in 18 months. because sometimes it can be really, really hard to get back into a code base that you wrote a year or so ago. And if I do it in literate programming mode, then I know that I've got the little dialogue. Okay, here's why I made this decision. Here are what the alternatives were and why I dismissed those alternatives. Maybe I might want to revisit that later on down the road. So I get that information recorded in along with the code.
Yes. Yeah.
But the frustration is that IMBA's been a fast-moving target. So they've been evolving the language rapidly, and a lot of the older code that was working 6 months ago, the language has changed enough now that I'm going to have to recode it in order to bring it into the current version and do that integration. So that's going to be a little bit time-consuming, but it should be doable.
Yes. To that end, I sort of many years ago settled on a pretty plodding coding style that is relatively easy to follow, or at least for me, such that it can be quite sort of pedestrian to look at it and fairly anticlimactic. To like, what is that? Oh, that's doing that. Okay, great. This is boring. Sort of satisfying those other urges with code golf, actual code golf. If you're familiar with that, is figuring out the absolute minimum number of keystrokes in order to achieve a certain piece of functionality.
I'm guilty of that all too often.
Well, so if you keep those concerns separate and you don't actually leave those things in your code, you just show those off for the benefit of obtuseness to your friends, then that leaves your entire project much better off, because they really have no place in any kind of longer term repository unless there are great big caution signs sort of erected around them to say, this does this, don't worry if you don't understand why. I barely understood it at the time that I wrote it. But yeah, the best thing to do for code that is expected to be used again is to make it as plainly clear as possible. And I really like Robert Martin's Uncle Bob's work on refactoring to that end. The general practice of doing things like having methods that are no longer than 20 lines, and refactoring into subordinate methods whenever you find that you're shifting levels of abstraction in a piece of functionality. Those are essential for being able to then pull those things out. I have a lot of truck with beginning to prototype by just copy pasting nearly identical pieces of code and then modifying them minimally. But the actual good software engineering practice of refactoring to patterns is very valuable for the benefit of maintenance and mutual legibility of your code amongst other people's. Which, yeah, I learned with much frustration on my end and my coworkers' parts over a couple of decades.
So, in terms of our forum here, we need to decide on some directions forward. There's been, I think, a little bit of disagreement lately, but I'm going to try to focus on the book in VR. That's it. And that is not easy, just actually getting a PDF. If that's the basis of it in there, and then getting the metadata in there is a huge challenge. And you are, Brental, you're working on something along the lines of the prototyping book, right? For this book.
I'm looking at trying to understand what the book is in terms of the content and the preponderance of approaches to sort of presenting different pieces of information, and then thinking about the display capabilities of computers, but specifically of virtual reality for the benefit of being able to kind of lend its best attributes to what might be most useful to be able to consume that information, kind of relate to it. So, like I said, that's being able to characterize text that happens to be an interview as distinct from text that happens to be an article, and any other kind of form of information that happens to be in there, because I think there are differences in voice, there are differences in what sort of expectations the reader must have in order to be able to get the best out of those things, and giving them the handles, the material affordances to be able to understand what they should do in order to read, I think is a valuable approach.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, I'm trying to look at something more mechanical and more plain and more
Mhm.
generalizable. I think you're making kind of like a custom CD-ROM, so to speak, in the good sense that you're,
It can be the yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I don't mind if it turns out to be the bad sense either. What I'm trying to think about is what is the best representation for information based on the computer systems that we have, and based on the interactions and input output systems that we have available. Um, and that can be no, actually, what we have is right. I think it's unlikely.
Yeah, I look forward to Wednesday to actually putting the pro in my head and see how it feels, what kind of difference. It'll be interesting, but I'm still trying to chase someone down for coding. My liquid coders don't seem to have the right skill set to get anything done because there's so many layers. And I think the discussion in the group is kind of frustrating because it's divergent rather than convergent at the moment. And with a month to go, that's probably not the direction that's most conducive to getting a coherent piece to have a link to in the book. Because the idea was that you open the book on whatever reader you're on, click on a link, open the web browser. If you happen to have a headset on, you have a VR representation of the book. And the way it is now, because Mozilla, I mean, hubs and all of that, it's good to an extent, but it's also a really straitjacket toy. I can't even put in a book there we can change pages. There's no interactivity except for, emitters and stuff that I so far understand.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to have to look at some of these mechanisms somehow.
Yeah, well, you saw my page turning and stuff that I built. Those things are possible. It's just a matter of figuring out what sort of computational power you have available and what are the API level sort of interfaces. So yeah, it'll be great to see what kind of power is actually available on Quest Pro for that.
Yeah, the Quest doesn't seem to have that much more power. But the kind of things we're looking at are really relatively small.
Yes, I mean the page turn system that I have makes use of multiple sort of procedurally generated skinned geometries using a mesh standard material, which is a physically based rendered system using shadow mapping. So there are places to spend it if you have it. Yeah, you could dial any of those back, but it would come at an experiential cost. I personally love the result of having pages that obscure each other, that shade each other, things like that, and having the glint and the highlight of it. It's tempting even to add another material map for the bump or the metalness, given that there tends to be a slightly higher gloss to the ink that's been printed on to the page that's been inked versus the page that's not, and an impact to the normal and reflectivity of it. And it's very tempting to see just what that does. One of the reasons why I do that is because it provokes the engineers who occupy the stack below me to see what kind of benefits might flow from it. But yeah, the result is that you can end up being quite profligate with the computing and resources around in order to sort of in order to draw people into trying to find more power for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely worth experimenting with that, but I also think the opposite direction is okay. Like the thing that's in the webpage I just shared, where you do this to go to the next page. But if you do this, it just goes to the next level 1 heading. What I want to do in Reader is, arrow to the right obviously goes 1 page. But if you go arrow down, it skips to the next level 1 heading. But also what I mean to show you is instant page turning is pretty good too. For a different kind of use, for a different kind of reason. But this is a great example of what I mean with wanting to get to so here we have Jamie Joyce. It's a good presentation, But if this is not what you want to read right now, to have to do this, is tiresome because you can't just do the finger movement every page. You have to analyze and see if it's something you do want to read. And additionally, if you are instantly flipping into an outline like this, even if you have it highlighted, let's say we bold her name, even if we do that, so you know where you are, how are you going to know who Jim is and what he's talking about? You know, these titles give almost nothing. Caleb, is that a fish? You know, it's like, there's nothing here. You may know the people that you came to the book from. That's why I think it's so valuable to have an instant access to the next section without any beautification at all.
Oh, speaking of material effects, I dropped a link in to an absolutely insane, mostly CSS with just a touch of JavaScript behind it, simulation of holographic film on Pokemon cards. So that's just absolutely bizarre and wild.
Pretty cool.
Also, should we be looking at Unity or Unreal Engine as opposed to just the WebVR?
No. There's nothing wrong with the community doing that over time, but this right now it's really important that it's open in the same way that I have Reader and Author for Mac. Fabian can't use that because he doesn't use Mac, that kind of stuff. That's part of it. Also, it's the supporting the open future. Because I think most of the issues you have, Peter, which I do think we share with Meta, for instance, is about the app, and Unity have their own rights and obligations. They all do. So not at this stage. I don't think we should do it at this stage.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I really don't want to be trapped in a walled garden where our VR work is only accessible on one platform. And then you never know what's going to happen with the direction of that platform down the road.
I would also add, even on a more pragmatic level, I used Unity for prototyping for several years, and the reality was that it's for games. Games don't feature a lot of information or documents, and so the maturity of the toolchain for making anything representative of information or documents reflects that immaturity. In practice, when people make UI and UI elements within Unity, for many years, they actually used Flash. And some applications and systems still use Flash for it, because Flash was a reasonable middle ground between application runtime and document management system. In practice these days, now that Flash itself is completely gone, people do some incredible and weird things sometimes and fairly frequently, actually reinventing HTML for the benefit of putting it into Flash. Into Unity. So I think it doesn't get you much other than potentially a more efficient runtime, the ability to do things like post-processing per eye, systems like that. But no, I wouldn't do any prototyping in Unity if it was even remotely possible to do the same thing.
That's kind of funny. I just got a message from Wendy Hall. She is on the Queen Mary 2. She forgot that it's my company, my family company that does the crewing. So they're all saying hello, which is nice. She's saying Ted Nelson tomorrow, which is nice. That was funny. Right. So in trying to find someone to build the simple thing that I'm talking about, what are the VR XR skills that I need to have listed here?
If you're going to do 3D, then if you're going to do web, then it needs to be Three.js or WebGL.
I did Three.js, and I'm not sure.
THREE.
What?
THREE JS.
The word 3.
Like this. Okay. That's it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
A-frame.
And if you want WebGL, WebGL.
Because I don't need to say HTML. They should know what that is.
Yeah.
See what we come up with there. This is just weird. How can they rank developer as management or leadership? That's not what developers are, right? I guess it's just a weird pairing thing.
Yeah, I mean, so
Maybe
yeah,
individual.
and individual contributor in a big tech context can run the gamut from just new entry into sort of nearly vice president level. So I would imagine Bruce Horn is still on the books as an IC, but he's probably an Apple fellow, which means that he's sort of politically more akin to a vice president level in terms of his clout, but doesn't have any management responsibilities.
Well, that was annoying. It all disappeared because it half logged me in. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. So individual contributor can be a big thing, not necessarily.
Yeah, yeah. I'm an individual contributor and somewhere in the middle.
All right. Okay. I'll just do this later then.
There are also forums. So there's a Discord channel, a Discord server for WebXR and for ARVR. Let's see, what have I got? And they have job things. Just log in. Yeah, so there's a WebXR Discord, and they have jobs. There's a Three.js Discord. They have jobs. There's a Silicon Valley VR, but that's probably not necessarily what you want to be looking for. And a lot of universities have a fairly good haul of students who are interesting enough, and that the lecturers will be willing to sort of give you a person if they have a more promising one. I got a number of jobs that way in my school.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to find anywhere, but but at some point we just got to find someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's cool. I didn't realize that the Queen Mary 2 was bigger than the inside ring of Apple Park.
Okay, well, let's see if we get anything useful back here. Time slots. For crying out loud, I have to go through a project manager there now. Okay, maybe I can do that. It just gets very expensive once you have a manager and layer in between.
Yeah,
They have
Yeah, no, it was a really funny. People were pointing out that with the acquisition of Figma for I think it was $20 billion, that shows you the price of making software, because in that particular case, like I really don't think that Adobe was buying it for its community or to close out competition as much as that they simply don't have the ability to build software in that way, and this helps them get it. And yeah, while a developer can be cheap, software development per se gets very expensive very quickly because of those coordination issues and questions.
Yeah, just posting on Twitter as well. Yeah, no, it is. It's having the rudder, which direction to go. Like, critics love to point out that Steve Jobs never invented anything. Not really the point. He invented the structure and direction for a whole entire company. So, that's an example of that, I would say. But anyway, right. Yeah, it will be interesting. But yeah, I mean, Peter, if you want to build stuff, I'm happy to test it, of course.
Very good. But my main project, right now, my main goal is to get my literate programming workflow back in place. Because when I'm doing the little small scale experiments, usually that doesn't pay to go into the literate programming mode for them. And I'll just go off and use, Ember Create sample project and then just play with that directly in VS Code. But then once I know how to do that particular little sub thing, I want to be able to get it back into a big project and make sure that it's documented enough so I'll understand how it worked down the road.
Yeah, but obviously that's what you're doing in general, right? For your general work.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
hi, Mark. Welcome.
Yeah. Oh, sorry I'm late. Takes my camera a while to adjust.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we're just looking at different ways to go forward. Brandel is going to try to do something for the book along the lines of what he's doing with the prototyping book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to find out how to do a general kind of a PDF reader with some novel interactions that can be extended in a VR space. I started looking at the TopTal, one of those talent places, and they've all become, oh, fantastic, talk to your project manager here, and that's just, then it gets ridiculously expensive.
Yeah. Just a quick thing prompted by your question to me the other day about image maps and things, and Brandel can probably answer that. Maybe able to answer it. Is that it seems to me that the issue with the challenge with image maps is not the concept of the image map. It's essentially that it's making it so. I mean, I know, for instance, you can make an image map even with SVG now, but effectively you're still using pixels as predicated on the pixel defined size of the image you say you're making, and then you put this into a completely different environment. Now you may scale and pinch and fold it, and the question sort of becomes, well, if I fold the middle third of the image map or of the overall image, does whatever is doing the image map handling know that some of the sort of click points have changed? And I just don't know. And I mean, short of, I'm not in a position to build it immediately, but these are sort of things that I think are, there for us to resolve.
But Mark, there are no there are no image map foldable systems out there, are there? So the question is not what would happen. The question is what would we like to have happen?
Okay, well, no, fine. Yeah, fair point. I'm just sort of the reason I sort of say this, I think of this article is trying to sort of digest it down to the point that there'll be people who understand image maps. There'll be some people who understand VR. There'll be some people who understand. It's a much small number who understand both. But it's just making the point that yes, you can make an image map, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's just going to magically in your mind translate to what you think it does on a web page. And
I really don't understand the issue, because an image map works on a web page, right? I mean, that's the whole origin story.
Yes, it does. But you probably, the other thing is for an SV, for a scalable, for something scalable, you don't really want to, I don't think you want to use an SVG as if it was a pixelated image map, because then you're basically turning the SVG into a rasterized image because it sort of goes to the box. What you probably actually, what would be more elegant is to actually use the SVG as an SVG include and use the click events on the shapes, because then you're not having to define shapes, bearing in mind that most people, not necessarily the people in this conversation, wouldn't have a clue where to start in doing that. They just say, well, I want that box to go to this thing. And that's fine if you have someone you can pay to do that for
Mark,
you.
Is there an image map for SVG or scalable vector graphics system that exists currently?
No. Well, okay. Sorry, up to a point, Lord Copper. It comes in two parts. HTML now will let you pass an SVG image as the target image in an HTML5 image map, and it will work. So the browsers are now clever enough to put the SVG in the box where they put a raster image, and then in that regard, it works like a normal image map where you then write the HTML to define the shapes of all the bits you want to be clickable points and the URLs, and then that in web form will work. The alternative method is that you actually write the data into the SVG. So, and then in which case you use a different method. So basically the SVG knows that if this shape detects a click within it, it will then do an action. But you do that by embedding the SVG, which is also now broadly supported without extra shims. It begins to be moot, because where most people will be is probably having vector data in a PDF, at which point sort of all bets are off, I think. I don't think there's a simple and elegant way to do that. And I'm just mindful of the fact that most of the people who will be faced with this problem will not be expert in any of this. And that's the thing I've sort of been trying to tease apart to people to understand where all the potential bits don't quite fit together, and the bits that you either have to do or you need to ask someone to do to get to the sunny uplands beyond, where in VR you just click something, it all just works.
If you want to invent a new way of doing it, I think that is absolutely a good idea. If you don't want to do that, I don't see pixels as being a problem, because it's not very often someone's going to try to click at the very edge of something. And I can't see image maps generally being very, very highly detailed. So even if it is a vector illustration, if it says, 2000 units this way, relative to something, I think it's still within human kind of physical graspability, so to speak.
The bit where I'm slightly, no, I'd agree. The bit where I'm slightly lost, because I just don't have enough sort of depth of understanding of the 3D design space, is my broad understanding is, unless you actually literally produce a rectangle that is acting as a sort of floating browser window, that if you take a picture and put it in, you're probably going to use it as a fill on a surface of a 3D space. Is that fair, Brian? Which is a whole different ballgame. So, which is why I'm conscious it's all very well. So, well, I'll just put in a web page, because that assumes that you can put a web page in the amazingly funky sort of convoluted shape that you then want to use it. And again, I suspect all these things are resolvable, but I think for where we are at the moment, that not everything is particularly easy. Yes, you can take you know, a web, an HTML5 image map, and obviously if you display it in a space in VR that knows it is a web page, then yes. If you then want to do all sorts of funky transforms with that web page, I suspect things might get interesting. I don't know, but I wouldn't assume it would all just work if you decided you were going to take your rectangle and sort of stretch it into a, you know, a trapezoid or something.
I see. What you're saying is, yeah. So in practice, when people have raster pixel-based texture maps that are present on objects, what's required is some form of texture mapping method, either say cylindrical mapping or planar mapping, or what's in practice people do is they roll their own and they have a UV map, which is a mapping from the 3D coordinates of the pixel from the points in space to the 2D coordinates on the source texture map. And if you look at character animation or character skinning, then you'll see all kinds of disgusting kind of mid-century style horrors of skin stretched over various surfaces for the benefit of being able to paint certain details onto faces and other details onto the sides of heads. And then the question becomes, how do you translate things from the three-dimensional space back to the texture space? There are solutions for that. It's possible to look back up into the the corresponding UV coordinate for a given ray, and Three.js has functionality for that. The problem is deeper, though, in that very little is provided for right now in WebGL, WebVR, WebXR, for the benefit of being able to make any meaningful manipulations or anything at all. Because the API, as I've told people in the past, is actually a devices API. It's just for being able to get pixels from a certain place onto your eyes, and then the absolute minimum coverage of information about the specific pose of the device, such that you're able to come up with what those appropriate projections are going to be. So in terms of the actual interactions that is provided per se by WebXR, it's essentially zero. There is nothing that you can do in the way that you can make an image map or create an H1 tag or an H1 heading or anything like that. And one of my major contributions that I haven't managed to really sing from the rooftops is that I've made some stuff to be able to build those things, and most people haven't really even gotten to the point where they can recognize how important that is. And that's not to say the fools, they'll learn it one day, but they will, I hope. So in that sense, like HTML, WebXR, they don't provide anything, and so yes, this point of like what to do with a image map is germane in that regard, but it is possible to build on top of all those systems with Three.js, which again itself doesn't have any of these concepts. Svelte, something that Peter linked a CSS 3D implementation of some interesting effects, is something that has slightly higher level hooks. React 3D Fiber, yeah, I think R3F is another thing that people have used using sort of Facebook's favorite flavor of HTML and JavaScript modifications. And again, those are, as well as A-Frame, are ways of being able to kind of ostensibly work at a slightly higher level of abstraction for the benefit of understanding those things. And I would say, I suspect that none of those currently have image maps here. It would be hopefully a short hop from seeing the problem to come up with a solution of cut their cloth.
I mean, I suppose the part of the starting thing, because I've been working in the sense of the provocation of using Bob's thing. So, take the Narix thing. I think there are, I don't know, at least 400 objects, and that's without me going after pure images. And if we said, if we sort of delivered on the dream, well, what I want to do is if I click that box, I want to link to stuff about that box. So it's sense of, okay, so how would we wire up those 400 discrete events in a way that didn't drive somebody mad? I'd have to sort of type it in there or something. And I think the answer is that it's possible, but it's almost entirely manual at this point. Because I meant to ask, when you did the mural in 3D, Bob's mural, were you using were you skinning out in the PDF there, or did you make a raster image of it and put that in the?
I made a raster image of it, relatively high resolution, and I cut it into 4 slices, 4,000 pixels on a side each, with the remainder being on a smaller one, for the benefit of arraying them in a way that gave me the maximum resolution, so that if you actually pulled it close to you, you could get it. There are all kinds of uncomfortable concessions that developers have to make for the benefit of the 3D systems, making pictures square and powers of 2, so that they need to be 8192 or 16,384 pixels on the side, things like that. And they also, for Well's sort of legacy reasons, although it's not exclusively the case these days, need to be below 4K. It's typically good practice for images on the web to be below 4K on a side. Because different image parsers have different and weird problems, because 512 kilobytes is as much as anyone would ever need, and there are a lot of those baked in at various sort of levels of the sort of the historical crust of substrate that the web is kind of teetering precipitously on, because at times.
One other thing I was sort of thinking about, because you're right, Fred, if no one's really actually done this in a reasonable working way, other than basically replicating a web page in a virtual environment, but pretending it's still basically replicating a 2D web page in a 3D environment. So the question is, well, what better can we do? So one of the problems, of course, if you do make an image map, is you've now separated your sort of source content from everything else, or it's going through a very narrow breakable tube of a URL. So it might be that if you think, take an author document as a for instance, and the payload of stuff you have with it, perhaps actually probably what you really want in a tool we don't yet have is that you've made your beautiful thing in Illustrator, you package it up, but in there probably goes some or a first level for quick response level of data that's sort of accessible and travels with that file. All these sort of things potentially there, and they matter because then it makes you think about, well, when you build the equivalent of sort of image ready for Illustrator, so there's something that someone who's the data guy say, look, just go and take this mass of stuff and put it in a template so that the artist can go make the image, sort of thing, which is one way I could see this might happen, or it might even be automated. So you have something that's able to link, so basically have a almost like a rough SVG template or something, or even just almost like stub objects that are in there with enough of a thing that says to the artist, okay, this is going to be the thing about this article, and they may want to make it a different size, but they know it's already linked up to what becomes the click event stuff if you use the full SVG model, and that would seem to be interesting, because that speaks to the sort of the idea that we had, that wouldn't it be really cool if you take one of these murals, and it's nice to have it in VR. It's even nicer if I can then go, say, pull this article out. So I need to know more about that, stretch it out, and then that starts to give me the background information. But to do that, we have to have something that is a simulacrum of a current image map, but I'm fast beginning to think isn't an image map, because we're not trying to recreate web pages. And if we do, I think we're making a rod for our own backs. So it's probably a good thing that it hasn't probably been, in a sense, badly solved yet, out of good intent, because it would just do that.
Yeah, but it's very much the case that no one, including most of the enthusiasts in WebXR, have really started to grapple with what is interesting and challenging about information in VR. And so, for better and worse, that does mean that the terrain is virgin for our benefit and our own exploration, because everybody in most people in web, and certainly everybody I've ever met with a stated interest in WebXR, doesn't really realize or understand how important hypertext is, or how difficult it was to come to the consensus of what a browser is and does, and the benefits that it gives to us. As I kind of mentioned in a Twitter thread, that like the reality of the distinctions and the explanations of what various tags are for, H1s, H2s, captions, sections, you know, all of those things. Site is a tag, although you wouldn't know it by looking it on the internet. Those are exceptionally important for the benefit of being able to structure information. Whereas everybody these days, I call it div soup, because it's div is a semantic element that has no specific meaning, and so people use it to the hilt, and because they haven't taken the time to think about it. And so, you know, one of the things I did with what to prototypes is I took an EPUB sort of HTML rendering and then turned that back into semantic HTML, creating things with site tags and setting up the document hierarchy, containing those in sections and things like that. I'm looking at what I think is the least worst exploit of the Future of Text 3, and seeing that that it's also some distance from semantic HTML, but I will sort of, I think, wrest it into some kind of shape in order to be able to see those things as having identifiable sections and stuff like that.
That's really interesting, actually, your point about the sort of distance of it being from a clean semantic thing, because again, it's not, this is sort of no foul thing. This is all voluntary discovery. So it also becomes a question, okay, well, if it's not mapping well, why isn't it? It's probably because it's starting out as RTF, which has no notions of semantics at all.
Right. So there's no containment.
Yeah. So it might be that one of the things that comes out of this is that, you know, the answer is that actually bite on the bullet. If the one thing I picked up early on from what you were saying is just how important the DOM is, because if you have a DOM or something like it, you have some semantics that are tractable.
Yes.
So the question comes, if say, well, if that's a sort of requirement, small r, or something we can't route around, then what does that say about our writing tool in terms of output? And indeed, how does that affect how we write? Because to me, it all begins to, the whole thing all maps around and comes back to the sort of thing that Bob's been mentioning, but we've all been talking about of having more structured documents, which is interesting because apart from if you're really writing fluid long form prose or writing a story, that has an implication for the way we might choose to write, or indeed train future generations to write for certain purposes. And that's not something I think we're considering at the moment. Well, you know, the wider sort of world is considering at the moment, and perhaps should.
Yes, and as a concrete example of that, my daughter, who's 9, so in J1, I don't do you use J1, J2 standard 1 through 4. I guess that would make her standard 3 in New Zealand, or year 5 in New Zealand. Anyway, she has a writing project, but it's in a PowerPoint document, Google Slides, and she's filling in text boxes. It's formalism at its core, and aside from the actual sort of material discomfort of that, in terms of just how poorly suited the tools specifically are, it's a really interesting and thought-provoking approach to calling what she's doing writing, because they are saying, like, what is the thing that goes in this box here, and functionally that is what any essay or a longer form piece of writing, as you say, really is. But it's amazing to see it sort of rendered so clear and concretely on the page like that.
Well, it's really interesting because I was reading I found an interview with Mark Bernstein, and he was just talking about the fact that, you know, a lot of it's amazing how much of this goes back to about the 1970s, 80s. The hypertext stuff got into this quite early on and realized there were some problems, but it's talking about it's a thing of premature formalism, and in a sense, because what you just described is right, saying, you know, what you put here, it's a bit like writing the abstract before you set off, which I think is bit of a Hail Mary. I mean, you've got to be bloody confident, or writing about something that has no ambiguity. The idea that you have the conceit that you would know before you've really got your hands around the subject, exactly what you might write a note to self saying, this is really what I want to say. The idea that you'll know the encapsulation of it, And that's sort of problematic, because that again shows that some of the things we ideally would like to do to make it easy for us to remediate our content actually works quite strongly against a lot of our things in which we are well trained. I mean, okay, that's the way life is, but I think, you know, that's another interesting thing for us to flag up for those in the wider world who are interested to know.
Yeah, I met Edgar's coding teacher today, and he says how the learning now is basically drag and drop variables, which is kind of cool. But kind of back to the book, we need to, I'm getting quite frustrated that I'm not finding the way through which to make, because this is a new medium. I can't call upon the resources that I'm familiar with. You know, I also can't just mock it up in Photoshop. Using hubs is absolute hell, because you can't go parallel. There's no AD key. You can't do this. Everything has to go around the center, which is bizarre. Anyway, and also, I don't see a huge amount of appetite in the community for a discussion around what a shared view of the book might be. So maybe it's time to instead in this book have a list of links to different kinds of views of the book, because I see, you know, Adam Byrne is pulling it in all kinds of interesting directions, but he doesn't want to join these chats. Fabian has his idea, Randall has his idea. And these discussions, I mean, we've talked about this kind of writing that you just talked about many, many times, and it is very, very important. But I think we need to just basically abandon the thoughts of having one specific VR view of the book. I just can't see that as being possible.
I think that sort of makes sense, and I know it may feel like that. I don't think that's actually a defeat. I think one of the things I really was thinking at the end of the last conversation we had is actually just through no fault of our own, how far we are from where we'd like to be in terms of, because the more you look, the more you realize that the one does not, the things that we imagine.
But there isn't that much looking. It's so much spinning. Like
no, it is looking.
No, prototyping, right? Trying it. I mean, like the question of an image map's been going for 2 months now, right? We should just try it. You know, and a basic image map is what it is. You know, if you list the issues that might happen in VR, that's really worth it. That's the next stage. But you know, at some point, we need to put down, here's a thing we think is a thing, we'd like this thing. Oh, here are issues, you know, and move forward.
Sure. Well, what image maps do you, to answer your question, what sort of image maps would we use in the book? Which things do you think we want image maps?
I have no plans for image maps in the book.
Okay.
But it's something that if you wanted to have a piece on it, we could make one. Similarly, I have no plans for murals in the book, but Bob has some smaller images that he says are previous murals. I think one thing that would be really useful is to have another appendix where we can have a high resolution or vector, whatever he will give us, mural as one example. It could be his nuclear stuff, I don't care. But because what we're talking about is the interaction.
Yeah.
Similarly, the PDF of pictures from the day I'd like to include, and it would be nice to have a nice way of viewing that. But
that can be part of, I mean, in a way, for many, you know, that can be part of the enrichment. And for many people, you know, that may be magical to a degree, because you don't get that from a book. I know from where we sit that it might seem like small beer, but I don't think it necessarily is not delivering on the notion of enrichment. The other thing that did occur to me is you've mentioned the timeline. So that's one thing, because there's time, you know, you've built the timeline that's in the book, and we have information on if that needs to be recut into a different format for make it easier for use. The question is how we use it in the VR. And the other thing was the map that you're taking out of effectively the map view in Author. One of the it's difficult. One of the challenges, of course, is that maps work best as exploration spaces.
Yeah, but Mark, all of this, unless we can find a way to code the basic book, we can't have any of these.
Well, the reason I'm asking the question is I'm trying to work out how we can do it, because part of the chicken egg problem is what we want and what we have and not particularly well aligned.
Okay, so
And it's
I went through that before you came here today, and don't worry,
Okay, sorry.
we were all late, so that's not a dig at that at all. Basically, I fundamentally think that over the last 4,000 or 5,000 years, the size of a book is for human reading is actually quite good. No one wants to read a billboard, and no one wants to read on their Apple Watch. So to start with a VR environment where what you have, okay, forget VR, let's just say AR, because you brought up a really important point today. I model sitting, you model standing. That's important. So if all we do is start with a rectangle that is 100% the PDF, 2-page spread, and allow you to put that in a comfortable reading position, I think that's 80% there, as long as you can turn the pages as well, right? And then my pet thing now is you do this to go page by page, but you go this if you want to go to the next section. Maybe in testing it's rubbish. We don't know yet. But what I hoped we could find a way to get that built, because then we can start talking about these issues. I pull out this, I pull out that. What does that mean? Then we get to the next level.
Yeah. So interesting enough with your interaction. So the interaction has to be detected in the sort of the VR environment, and then it's got to communicate through into the document, I presume. So
yeah, I mean, the assumptions I'm making is to build an environment where I'm being completely selfish because I have to use my own background. It is a PDF with visual meta, extended visual meta. We can, of course, cheat by having JSON access and all of that. That's fine. But the idea is that the environment understands all of that metadata for the book, and it has hand tracking and, of course, controller tracking. So that, because when I work in Immersed, which is not bad at all, it's a little bit better now with how you change the view. But when I did testing many, many years ago, looking at people reading at Starbucks, I found that people who were reading paper documents rather than digital documents moved them a lot more. So I think that just to hold a book and move it about is actually really, really important. And it's a basic, it's the most unexciting, unsexy part of this period. But if it's going to be something people will come back to, the basic experience has to be pleasant. And then hopefully this environment could be extensible. Like Peter was talking about, a shared code base or something where, I want to now see the pictures. I want to move the mural around. And if that was exactly what Brandel built for Bob's murals, same image, same interactions, no changes, if that could be integrated, that would be freaking amazing. And when it comes to the kind of map graph view, I find that to be really, really difficult, because it's super easy to put it up in the sense that Brandel did it for us,
Yeah.
But to make it actually useful is super hard, because it's a mess, right? So that's why we have to look at how do you unmess it? You add structure, and this goes into exactly the discussion you were having just now. Do you write an essay by filling in the boxes? What kind of freedom do you want? In Doug's NLS, as you know, that was a very structured writing environment. A paragraph meant something and so on. We can try, and this is obviously what Vint was saying as well in his email to us, that it's good to have structure. We have some structure, but my dream, which right now I see no way of realizing, and I'm so stressed my shoulders are probably going to snap like crystals. My dream is to build a really prosaic thing that is simple, we just talked about, but that we can plug in all these other amazing things. But this, what is scary and exciting about VR, XR, AR, everything has to be built from scratch right now, at least visually. Of course, there's some libraries and whatnot, but there is no there. On a computer, you have a desk, you have a background, you have a desktop. We have nothing.
Yeah, because I liked your video, the one you sent the link about doing the gestures and things. And I was just wondering, so presumably in that, when you did your raise and your window got wider, that was something that was effectively mocked, because so the inference was that this particular motion is detected, display space now knows it needs to expand and draw in additional content, draw it into the space. And I presume none of that is actually manifest in software at the moment. That's all going to be built.
No, it isn't. But Brenda, let me just ask you, to do what we're talking about, let's pretend that you have agreed to do it because you know what it means. So that means we can extend it to others, right? So the first issue is how to just get a PDF in. That's medium level, right? But then it has to
No,
be,
that's high. That's very high.
that's high level, high difficulty.
Yeah, because you have to parse it.
But what if it's baked in?
You still you have to parse it.
Okay, so what if it's JSON then, and we just entirely cheat? We just say in the future you'll be able to do this way.
If you want to have something that looks like you're opening a document, that's very easy. But to generalize it to opening any document that you don't know the specifics of ahead of time, quickly balloons out.
I'm only talking about PDFs with Visual Meta.
Oh no, that's still huge. I mean, like, what I mean is a specific document. Like, if you want to mock up the appearance of opening a document, that's very easy. Knowledge Navigator style. You know, if you have a script that you want to follow, insofar as you have that thing happening, then that is possible. If you want to go anything further than that, then you need to have some generalizable representation that you're able to kind of parse and segment and delineate, and it becomes increasingly very, very difficult. You know, so I make no guarantees of my own HTML parsing system. HTML is the simplest thing in the world to be able to parse and format because it's in many regards self-describing. But even that falls down pretty quickly. So, you know, so I haven't. That said, you know, it's Adam and maybe Fabian have succeeded in processing PDFs. It's simply something that I've never myself done. I've parsed a small amount of Adobe Illustrator document for the benefit of extracting gradient meshes before. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, like any fresh format is a new fresh hell. And I couldn't make any guarantees as to opening a PDF or a JSON. The issue that I have with the JSON is that it doesn't have any information about presentation within it.
Right.
And that there are some benefits to the fact that HTML already does.
Okay, so absolutely fair enough. When it comes to Visual Meta, I could of course give you the source code to Reader, which has all that parsing stuff in it, which may or may not work, but that's for the future. But when it comes to, let's pretend we are a company, this is all commercial thing, and all we're doing now is making a demo to get investors. So we fake as much as we can, absolutely not a problem. But the idea is that you are reading the book in a normal PDF reader. There's a link to a web page, which is our website /XR Reader, something like that. If you have a headset on, you can then click the view in VR, as we are all familiar with. And all that happens then is that you have the document floating in space, 2-page spread. And you can do those basic interactions. You know, they're literally images at this point. And you can do, you know, a few things. So it is known what is a title page, what is not a title page. And we also, through cheating, we make so if you pinch here on Bob's mural, then it basically loads what you've already made. Is that like a huge reach?
As demonstrationware, no. You can easily orchestrate something that has the appearance of doing that for the benefit of being able to sell a vision. To build the software to do that requires many people, many months. Like it's hard, and no one is very good at it. And I am one of the best in the world. It's like, I'm sorry. It's,
yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, you don't have to apologize for being one of the best in the world. Well, the thing is, I mean, okay, we are talking demoware. We are talking Knowledge Navigator. Of course we are. You know, we're not talking about shipping a new Illustrator competitor or something like that, but
Um,
if it is, let's say that okay, so let's say that we have the book as, thank you, Mark, as basically an image map, right? Let's put it that way. So we say that wherever in the book, and I'm meaning the simplest image map in the world, wherever there is a non-textual thing that is somehow highlighted, the user does an interaction with it, it's pre-scripted what that will do. That gets it more feasible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that takes it down from a multi-year research project into something that you can construct in a week or two with a fairly tightly controlled kind of script in the sense of what it is that somebody expects to do. Like that's kind of the point of what a prototype is, that being able to kind of say, this is the way that we're going to demonstrate this capability, turns it into from years of effort to days.
Okay, so that's really good. So if we then, okay, so I'm trying to separate on the Mac we have a desktop. In this environment we have a booktop, whatever we call it. We have this rectangular thing that represents the book. So I don't want to call it the book, because the book obviously is lots of different things, but to split the project in two. Number one, click on the link, book is here, you can swipe through, you can maybe do this next section because it understands, by whatever. And then a few places you can do this, right? And when you do this, it is then a separate project. So one of them, of course, would be your mural. One of them would be load all the images that are in the appendix into a slideshow, whatever. Those things can be relatively separated as projects, right?
Yeah, you could do that in a week.
What of this can you help me spec for someone to do, and what of this would you like to do yourself, to be honest?
So I guess I can help you spec. The way, so the one other aspect of it is that the way that you would approach doing it doesn't have anything, like it would be, in order to do it in a week, you have to be committed to throwing everything away for demonstrating anything but exactly that thing. So prototypes are throwaway, right? And they really must be, in order to maintain their integrity as being the minimal enclosure around a given piece of functionality. So any hope that it can sort of be built to, if you really want to build it as quickly as possible, then what you do is you essentially lay out the traumatis personae of like a texture object for this page, a texture object for that page, and just put the absolute minimum amount of work into the interactivity for doing that. Like the WWDC videos put together by the prototyping team illustrated the experience well. They prototype in Keynote.
Keynote's amazing.
And while that's, you're right. No, and part of it is because they prototype in Keynote, and they also the Keynote team answers to the people who prototype in Keynote. But yes, it's incredible in terms of the ability to be able to kind of have the appearance of sort of sequencing these actions. Unfortunately, Keynote is not, a virtual reality based, platform, so you won't have the benefit of being able to do that. But the closest thing would probably be, it's really it's the stuff of graduate papers and presentations to, Chi and WIST and VRIST and stuff like that at this point.
Okay, so here's the thing, Brandel. If you're going to do parts of this for this, I'm just going to have to send you a Quest Pro, because otherwise you don't know what you're working on.
So I will probably have access to a Quest Pro. You don't need to you don't need to worry about that.
No, but this is
I-
called a bribe.
Okay. Let me think about it. Yeah. So if you, the thing that would help me the most is the thing that would help everyone else the most is if you have a really specific vision, again, Knowledge Navigator style of the exact set of pages, exactly what you want to have on them, and then the exact set of actions that you want to have kind of gluing those events together. And then once you have those, as long as it's okay for the system to do that and only that, then the level of requisite skill for somebody to be able to put that kind of thing together is vastly lower. And I could probably send you, I actually, I could talk to some of the former interns that I had at Apple, to say, here's a chance to demonstrate something interesting that's actually, graphical fidelity is appealingly not actually the priority. Give it a go.
Yeah, that would be great. And what I suggest we do then is I email again today the people who haven't finished their articles, Mark Anderson, and I say that I must have the final piece by next Sunday. And that means that this week, me plus whoever wants to, as in begging for your interest, will mock up the interactions. And then next Monday, we will have a PDF that is final, barring any surprises. So we can even go into Photoshop and literally make pages, blocks of pages pink if we need to, so the system can recognize an area. And then we say exactly what it relates to, taking the image map attitude.
Fred, would it also help in terms of, in a sense, getting to tractable things for the prototype, that if the pages we want to use, if we decide effectively the pages we want to use, and then we reconstruct them as styled HTML, because if we're only doing it for a spread or a couple of spreads, I imagine that again.
No, we're doing the whole book. But most of the pages will not be interactive. But the reason is, and I'm watching everybody's heads here, the reason is that I truly think that if we can get this placement thing working okay, then it will actually be nice to read, not just do the interactions. I truly think that, based on my experience in reading in VR so far. And I think that'll be a groundbreaking thing for us to either realize yes or no. And then a few pages within that will be interactive, just a few images. It's not like every word or paragraph or anything.
Right, that's what I mean. On the pages that you want to be interactive, we may want to swap to the subterfuge, that instead of maybe looking at some kind of web viewer that's just showing you a PDF, that we are able to swap to the thing.
They'll just be rectangles to be touched. That's it.
But just is one of those terms. What I'm thinking about is that it wouldn't be that hard, say for a 2-page spread, to probably make it look in the same way as it's going to look as a PDF, but specifically so that we have the hooks for the so effectively there's a DOM for whoever is programming this, so that they can have it's just easier for them to do the interactions they need.
Okay, Brandel, what do you think?
My exhortation still stands. Like the less you can commit to, the more people will be able to deliver it for you. The desire to have all of the pages of a thing is laudable, but it cuts down the sort of it fences in the range of tricks that a person has available to them to be able to kind of create the appearance and the impression of something. So if you can demonstrate something with less, then it is better to make less.
Okay, so here's the actual book. Let's say that we don't necessarily want links to be live because there's many small ones. But other than that, we go through here on the VR reading page, we probably want to have direct links to other work like what you're doing, Brandel. So that would be a
right. No, but so what I'm saying, Frode, is it would be better, far better, if you could commit to just allowing somebody to make 20 JPEGs of the first 20 pages. They can be high res, they can look great. People, JPEG technology has come a long way these days. But if you can limit it to that and then say, okay, but if you click on this JPEG here, then it does that. Then that will take you a lot further. That will take a prototyper's time and your money a lot further if you're willing to do that for the benefit of being able to kind of explore and discover the hidden truths that are locked inside it. And the moment you start saying you want this to be text, you want that to be a link, those things scale very non-linearly into time and cost, and also limiting the sort of the creative flexibility that you can enjoy as a consequence of playing with it in that way. Because the moment that you say, I want to change the font size, or I want to change the pagination, then you're sort of beholden to an entire set of technological kind of decisions that you've had to make in order to be able to get something up and running. So the fewer decisions. Thanks, Peter. Just
Bye,
like
guys.
Peter was
Friday.
saying.
Oh yeah, see you later. Yeah, no, that makes sense. You can see. Oh, that's weird. Okay, okay, you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
I'm willing to not have links. I certainly don't want any type changes or anything like that. But I really think a very important thing that can be solved is when you're reading something interesting like this, you come to a block of text you're just not interested in, and you want to skip ahead past all these pages to the next section. So being able to skip to the next section, that is something that has level 1. Of course, it's pre-encoded somehow. If we can only do that and then click on one single mural to make it go big, that's fine. But the reason I'm being a bit questioning the master here is different kinds of interactions, of course, would be great to show. But I think the most valuable thing is it's pleasant to read and it's pleasant to go through a large volume to find what you want. I think we can demonstrate that those things are real, because otherwise, I think it'll come across as just another gadget demo. But do you really think that, let's say, 500 JPEGs would be too much?
No. If you have the ability to compose something out of those 500 JPEGs, then it makes it a relatively trivial thing for somebody to be able to stitch together 500 versus 50 versus 10. So if you have the ability to compose it, then yeah, by all means, you can build it that way. It may change in terms of how much things can be loaded at runtime versus having to be loaded on demand, those kinds of things. And that does have an impact on what kind of engineering. But if it's okay for it to be not text at all, then that's incredible. That's a great win for the prototyper. Prototypers hate text. So yeah, so if you can kind of really focus in on the specific thing that you want it to be able to deliver, then that helps a lot. I also have to go. I have a thing at 5 after here.
Oh, you have a day job?
I do. As much as it may surprise people, I'm apparently supposed to work for my living as well.
Yes.
Game.
Oh gosh, Reader just disappeared. I'm doing test versions. Oh, how boring. Right. Okay.
One of the things that yeah, no problem. One of the things that I have done just now, starting to look at it, is trying to render the output of my current draft of the book semantic, and it's going okay. For some reason, Jamie Joyce's article is completely dead. But I'm working through various bits and pieces. It's visible in Author, it's just not in the export. So I'll continue with that, and that will get me closer to some artifacts that I can kind of think with and play with, and I'll have more to report on Friday.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Fantastic. And I look forward to reporting back on whether the Pro is rubbish or a big thing.
Oh, yes, indeed. Cool. Okay.
It'll be fun. All right. See you later, Brandel.
Yeah.
Bye. I'm sorry I was late.
Yeah, everybody was late. It was 20 minutes before Peter showed up, then another 10 minutes at least before Brandel showed up. So, it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
I have to say, and I'm sure Brandel and Fabian will both watch this at some point in their life, but oh my God, it is frustrating, to basically try to build some kind of a unified thing. It is so frustrating. It's just.
But I sort of see why, and that really actually was really useful. I thought, sort of some Brandon's explanations today. It's just how many missing parts almost there are in the chain between what we imagine and can state quite simply and actually being done. Pretty much all the stuff that we're doing, like you're showing me in front of this is sort of known stuff. It's done in 2D, but I mean, it's just like this thing that the fact that actually images aren't really used the same way in VR at present with present tools in the way that we imagine them, because in our mind's eye we see them as either shown to us in an app or viewed in a web page, and that's now just a sort of almost a certainty to us, and that certainty now is no longer the case when you move to VR, short of looking at something in a browser. The only reason, by the way, I mentioned possibly taking some text and just turning it into HTML was simply if that was going to help the prototyper. But it sounds as though actually we're going for something, we need to go for something even simpler in terms of just using JPEGs and overlaying some stuff. So that would be, what I suggested would be a waste of time at this point. It wouldn't be worth the effort.
It's kind of interesting. I just saw that Stian Hochlev, like my tweet asking, he's behind Tana. So it's kind of fun. Not that it matters. He didn't retweet it. Okay.
Oh, something you might know because you see Oculus a lot more. I try to do something as simple as trying to get. We have visitors today, which was late, and my wife's friend was saying, "Well, can you show me what this sort of does?" So, all right, probably be easier because there are issues of sort of visual correction. So, well, I should be able to sort of cast it onto the screen of my Mac. Nah, well, I couldn't find anything that everything sort of either I had to take the headset off to read a page, couldn't read a screen too small. You need a sort of screen big enough for.
Hang on, what are you trying to do?
To see.
What?
I'm trying to get I assumed that, for instance, I would be able to cast from the Oculus to the Mac native Oculus
No, you
device,
can only
but
cast to
I
this.
don't think it does it on a P.
Only this.
Right. Okay.
But why would you want
that
to
wouldn't
cast
work
and not
in
have
this
them do
case.
it themselves?
Because I had very limited time. They know nothing about this. They have site correction, which isn't built into the thing. And I wouldn't be able to see what they were doing. And it would just all be, if this is your first try, what I actually wanted to be able to do was the thing that would be equally useful is to say, this is broadly what it looks like. This is the fidelity. So I'm not trying to give, at this stage, it's just saying to someone who has no knowledge of it at all, that this is sort of the kind of thing that you see.
I honestly would just put them into the desktop, put it on their heads, and they can change the view a little bit. But just even if you see just that room that is your desktop, even that gives a feeling because it doesn't move.
Sure. Well, the other thing also is to get it to cast, so I can put the headset on them, but I can watch what they're doing to help them do something. I'm amazed at actually how poor all that is. I mean, it's because I haven't looked into it yet, but it seems kind of a no-brainer. I mean, it goes back to my point to you in the mail about, there's a special place in hell for people who refuse to explain how anything works, because you sort of know, and it may change. I mean, one can signpost that, but part of actually introducing, especially quite new ideas, is one has to accept that there are the early adopters, and then there's a big chasm between people who are quite happy to adopt, but will require somebody else to make more of the effort to move them there, which means that you have to have things explain what things do. It's no good assuming that they know lots of stuff or will want to go and learn lots of stuff that is not germane. Yeah. So that's something useful that also we can do as a community, I think.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have to go as well now, and dinner and such. But yeah, I'll try to get this a bit more straightened out this week.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'm away. Hopefully I'm going to get a couple of hours on the train to do some writing tomorrow, but we'll see.
Excellent. Okay. Hope so.
Take care. Good to see you. Okay. Bye.